And welcome to Impact 2024, our continuing conversation where we talk about all different types of topics from current events, where we talk about things from race, religion, everything that you can think of. This is our continuing conversation. And as always, what we want to remind you is that you have an opportunity to participate in the conversation. And you do that through typing your questions and your comments into the comment section. So if you're on Facebook, comment section. If you're on YouTube, comment section, wherever you are, just go ahead and feel free to type in your comments and your questions. That is your ability to participate in this process. And I guess that's the benefit from watching live. And if you don't, that's fine as well. You can still always put comments and questions as the conversation continues to go. And as we normally do, we hop right into our topics. 2024. If y'all remember, that was 4 years ago. Well, 2024. It's 2024 now. 2020. Sorry, it was 4 years ago. What was happening in 2020 at this time? This was relatively, depending on what exact date you want to subscribe to it, the beginning of COVID. This is when COVID was starting to make its way into our common thoughts. We knew about it from November of 2019. This was called COVID-19. But in 2020, that's when it started to happen, where we started to think about masks here in March. And we started to think about maybe we needed to shut things down and social distance. That was 4 years ago. And surprisingly enough, it seems like it wasn't that long ago, but it fundamentally changed everything, from how we do church, from how we work, from how we do school, from everything. And even how we dress and everything like that. It really affected everything. It was 4 years ago. This spring will be the first COVID kids graduating high school. Well, what is that? These are the kids who, because they started high school in 2020, have never had the quote unquote traditional high school education experience. Didn't have the in the classroom experience. Didn't have the traditional prom and other things like that they had in the past. Now, they probably had some of those now, but their freshman year, they didn't have anything. Their sophomore year, they barely had anything. And then in their junior and senior year, some things were brought back into the consciousness. So in 2022, 2023, really had an opportunity to do some things. But now it's 2024, and they're getting ready to graduate. And so this is the first set of kids from the time that they were freshmen and until now that they are graduating seniors. These are the first set of kids that are graduating that were COVID kids. They had the full COVID experience through their full high school time. Why is that significant? Because now we have a new crop of people. We have a crop of folk who had a different type of socialization when it came to when it comes to communicating, how to communicate with people, having their educational experience. And from this point on, that's what we have. We're going to have COVID kids. Now it's going to be a longer time before you have kids who've never had any kind of educational experience, a traditional educational experience from the classroom, or a post-COVID experience that, they started in school in COVID, and we still got a couple of years away from that. When I started in elementary school, we still have a couple of years from that. But what we do have now is, again, these first college kids who are graduating, the first first high school kids who are graduating, first high school kids who are going into the workforce, who are going out into the world, who are joining the military, who are doing other things, who only had COVID experiences in high school. That is significant because this is a different type of kid. And what we have to look at is what are going to be the challenges and experiences that they had, which were different. What are they going to have their challenges and experiences when they go into the real world, as they say, quote unquote. And so we're talking about people who, again, when you were a freshman, you didn't have a lot of social events to go to. You sat back here and you had to social distance. You had to wear masks. You had to miss out on a lot of the traditional activities that happened early on in your high school experience. And then halfway through, a little bit more than halfway through, things switched and you were gradually given opportunities to get back, have assemblies with other people around, be in a classroom that wasn't totally separated, be in a classroom where you didn't have to wear a mask, where you could actually see other people's faces. And then during that time, they had all of the different dramas that came into play. On the one end, you had the fight over books and things like that. That happened in this 4-year period. On the other end, you had, experiences which I think are positive, the Black Lives Matter experience. You had a big concentration on diversity and inclusion. You had a big push towards gender, recognizing different gender roles and things like that. This group of kids had a very unique experience because the past 4 years for them was different. Now, there are a lot of 4-year periods that are crazy. You can go all throughout history, and there's a lot of 4-year periods that are crazy, and you're like, well, how did that affect these kids, and how did that affect those kids? I'm not saying one person had it worse or not, but what I'm saying is this group of kids had a special experience, and we got to see how that's going to affect everything that's going on. And we have to be prepared. What we know over the 4-year period that happened is that during this 4-year period, the rate of teen pregnancies dramatically went down. That was a plus. And so we can kind of look at these, we can extrapolate some things from that. One, they weren't around each other. So that kind of helped with that situation when you're COVID distancing from one another. But also in that same time, the rate of suicides amongst young people, people under the age of 25, went up to its all-time high. We also have, amongst that time, abortions amongst young people going down to a historic level. And so we have a different crop of folk who had some historic highs and historic lows. What does it tell us? And I'll tell you what it tells us from my end. I think what we have is a group of people who have a different type of socialization, and we're going to have to address that and approach that differently. You have people who haven't had the same amount of pushback verbally or emotionally because they haven't had the same interactions. So you have some people who I'm not going to say are softer, but I'm going to say probably will be a little bit more sensitive to change because of the fact that they haven't lived through and experienced some of these personal interactions as much. And so as they get out here and as they are adults and they go out into the workplace or go out into the world, some of the experiences that other individuals were able to have, they weren't able to have, which means they won't have the correct, not the word correct, but they won't have the reactions that we would typically have. And so when adversity comes around, they won't have that thick skin built up, or they won't have experienced some of the adversities. And so they will be a little bit less prepared. And I think that this generation or this group of people, this group of people and going forward, we have to understand that, especially just for this group. We have to understand that. And we have to adjust the way that we act, I think, for them. So what does that mean? What does that mean? Last week we talked about young people being able to be put in positions of leadership, or young people being able to be put in positions of power, or young people being able to be put into some of these positions that older people are now holding on too long. And we talked about them not being one of the reasons that young people are not prepared, or they may not be prepared. And so because people are staying in their roles longer, they may not have the opportunity to get prepared. But what we do know from this group of folk who are now graduating is that, again, one of that preparation They didn't have the same opportunities to do some of the things that we expect kids to do in high school. And so that level of preparation, or that expectation that we normally would have for high schoolers or young people, we expect you to have, a certain experience. We expect you to have a certain level of toughness and tough skin. You may not have that same amount, and we have to adjust how we look at you. It's not their fault. Over the 4-year period, you got to think about different things. They took away the SATs. And so during COVID, they didn't have any SATs or standardized, not any SATs. They didn't have the SATs, the ACT. They didn't have standardized testing that they had to really struggle and prepare for in order to get into college. And so now you got students who didn't have the big pressure of the big test as much. They took away a lot of testings. There was no, in a lot of school districts, they took away basically your ability to fail because of the trauma, the trauma that came through COVID and social distancing and missing so much school and having to do everything virtually. And so you have a group of people who didn't have as many pressures or standards put on them, and they're now future leaders of the world. And so, we could sit back here and get all grumpy and huffy and say, well, these kids, they don't have any whatever, or these kids aren't ready and they're not this and that. Of no fault of their own, they've had a different situation and scenario. And what we may see is that they may surprise us. But it is our job to recognize that these kids, these products of COVID, these products of a worldwide epidemic need to be treated differently. And that difference, I think, is similar to what we talked about last week, is bringing people in, bringing them along, giving them opportunities, forcing them into some opportunities, and making sure that they are prepared when it comes to being an adult in our churches, in our organizations, in jobs. You got to put people in positions and opportunities and let them grow into these opportunities, because some of their growth was stunted because of this horrible, pandemic. Comment. Do you think the lack of socialization has caused these students to be less effective in social interactions? For at least 2 years, they did not have to deal with bullying, hazing, or fitting into social groups. Yeah. Not only that, as I went through some of the things that changed, they did not have the social interaction. So there's a lot of negative things, like that was in the comment. I'll pull that back up. With bullying, with peer pressure, all that kind of stuff. A lot of negative interactions that they did not have to deal with. And then they had to deal with it. So they didn't have to deal with it, and then they had to deal with it. So for your freshman year, your sophomore year, some of your junior year, you didn't have to deal with it. And all of a sudden, now you're back in the classroom. For the last, basically 2 years, you're back in the classroom. And so all those pressures kind of come rushing back into you. One of the parts of it, maybe they benefited from not having to deal with that when they're 13 and 14, because that's when a lot of people start high school at 13, 14, 12. And then they experienced it as they got older when they were 15, 16, and maybe they were more prepared. And so maybe these kids are more effective because they were able to gather it later on, or maybe they're going to be less effective because they had 2 years of just not having to deal with any of those interactions. Or, as we know, the social side of technology. So, the Facebooks and the Twitters and all of that kind of stuff has the cyberbullying is significantly impacts their lives. And so it really kind of weighs on them. And maybe that was even worse over the time. We don't know. More so the question is, we just gotta understand it. If we see that they're different, if we see that young people's interactions or young people's motivations or young people's whatever, if we see a significant difference, we have to recognize that they're different. Their journey was different. Their path was different than most of the rest, most of the world in the past couple of years, past couple of decades. You went to high school. High school was your first chance to come in and win a football game or a basketball game, be around all your other friends. It was your first time to go to a dance, have the pressures of asking somebody to the dance or being asked to the dance or deciding that you don't want to do any of that and just go to the dance. You had to fit in the certain groups and figure out who you were going to eat lunch with and do all these different things. Those were the growth moments that you were supposed to have. And they were supposed to be significant on you when you were a freshman coming in. And they didn't have those moments. And so now they are the people who are going into college. They are the people who are going into the military. They are people who are going into the workforce. There are people who are going into trade schools and different things like that, whatever they're going to do after they graduate. And we don't know what that experience of not having that first 2 years of that high school experience is done to them. But we have to be, again, I think, and there's nothing that we're going to know. We don't know how, different people have said different things. You read some folk and they say, well, it makes them unprepared. And you have other people that says, well, it kind of helped with their social skills because they had to be able to make connections. They had to be able to make connections and it wasn't as easy. You can look at, you can look at different people's thoughts. Doesn't matter. I think it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter trying to figure it out exactly what it is. I think what's more important is to understand that there will be some differences. And it's just more important to understand that we will need to put people in positions, encourage people into positions, maybe push a little bit more. Instead of trying to help, just trying to sit back and sometimes you grown now, you need to find your way. I don't know if that's going to work necessarily with this particular population. And so we look at church. And over the time period, what we did see is that the number of people who were going to church went down. We did see over the national averages is that in the United States, this is the lowest when they do survey after survey after survey. They've done plenty. And if you've been here over the time, you've heard me say it from different times to times. This has been the lowest part in the United States history of people who identify as Christian and the lowest part in the United States history where people identify as having faith or believing in God. So what we do know is that this group will be the most unconnected to religion, the most unconnected to God, the most unconnected to Christianity that we've ever had come out before. And so that'll be a challenge because you have people who, all right, for the past 4 years, I never had any kind of relationship with church, or so I'm not going to church, or I don't know anything about church. And I'm not even going to school and meeting up with people who know about church. Because at least you had the opportunity to be around some other kids and be like, oh, well, they going to service, Wednesday night service, or they're going to youth group, or they're doing this. You didn't even have connections to those folks. And so I think there was a lot of connections that were lost and opportunities that were lost where people don't have that coping mechanism of being able to turn to the Lord or even have an opportunity because, again, when you're not around other folk, you don't really have the opportunity to see some of the things that they're doing. Even if you're online, it's not the same thing. Right? I'm not going to be able to sit there and be with you in school. And well, what are you doing this weekend? Well, I'm going over here to such and such and such. You can't really do that online. You can sit there and you can talk and you can ask people about things, but you just don't have that opportunity or to see what they were wearing or see, see what you were wearing and say, well, where'd you get that? Well, this weekend I did, there's just a lot of opportunities for learning and getting together. And we didn't have that. And so as we're looking at the church and we're looking at people with coping skills, we have to work extra hard. Unfortunately, we have to work extra hard to kind of go out here and show ourselves, I think, to people, because People haven't been seeing us. They haven't seen it. The exposure has gone down because the isolation has gone up, and a lot of people are still isolated. They never, even though COVID is 4 years away, we're 4 years out of, well, we're 4 years out of the start of it. A lot of people haven't left that isolation period. One of the things we've highlighted here is that the mental health issue over that time period, because people were isolated, the depression went up. There has been a big push in understanding of that, of mental health. But we got to realize that the mental health issues probably increased in that population because of the times that they've been away. So this isn't one of these more ones where we're going in on a topic that goes back and forth, back and forth. This is just we need to be aware of who we have that are adults now. I think we need to be aware of who we are going to be interacting with now, who you're going to be seeing in the workforce, in the real world now. You are now going to see that first group, that first crop of kids who had a significantly different experience for the whole time that they were in high school. And that's different if you missed a year. You were in high school for 3 years and then your senior year was ruined by COVID. I get it. It's even different if you were good and then your freshman year of college was ruined by COVID. That's a different situation. Yeah, you're good. But I think these pivotal years of when kids are, they from 12 to 16, or 13 to 17, or 14 to 18, those are some pivotal years. And those are now the adults and the people that are starting to adult. And we need to make sure that we have the ability to adjust to how they are now going to be. All right. Well, that's it. I know that was a brief one. I know that was quick, but I just, I think we all need to be aware, and we all need to realize it's 4 years ago. It went by quick, but that was a long time ago. And when I say it was a long time ago, 4 years is a long time because that is your whole entire high school experience, or if you don't, have to do some years twice. So your old college experience if you don't have to do some years twice. And so you have to realize, I think we have to realize that even though, especially for those of us who are older, 4 years for us isn't really a big deal. But 4 years for them, and those impactful 4 years, are life-changing years. And we have to be respectful of the journey that they went through that was different from ours. And we have to understand what we need to do to help them because their journey was different. All right. All right. So I want to thank everybody for being here. As a reminder, on Thursdays, we have Thursday Thirst, our Bible study. That's at 7:00. And that is on Facebook and YouTube. On Sundays at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, of course, Facebook and YouTube, we have service. Always have the opportunity to come here in person if you are either in the area. If you're either in the area and you want to come by, or you're not, in the area, but you still want to come by, come on by. So we always can have opportunity for people to come in the physical form. And then on Tuesdays today at 7:00, we have prayer from 7 to 7:45. We ask that you consider praying with us. And so you can do it from wherever you are. And then at 8:00, of course, we have Impact 2024. Also, real briefly, for those who will be in the Richmond area on this Friday, we will have game night. We have game night here at the location. That is something that you cannot do virtually. We're not playing, virtual cards or anything like that, or bingo over the internet. You have to come in person. And please feel free to come in. I'll put it right back on the screen. Please feel free to come in, be with us 6:00 on, or 7:00, 6:00 on Friday. So thank you. And thank you for all the comments. Please join us again next week. Same time, same place. Have a good one.